Welcome to the Happiness Matters podcast, where we'll explore happiness at work and show you how to coach yourself to be happier there and more successful too, no matter what.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the final coaching topic in this mini coaching journey we've been on in the last 11 episodes. How to explore your negative emotions from a coaching perspective, and more importantly, how to feel better, all in service of really getting to grips with where and why you're stuck in your happiness and success. I'm Julia Seal, and today we're exploring the world of toxicity, negative emotions at work, and particularly negative emotions and toxic behaviours. I've decided this week to split this topic into 2 coaching sessions, as toxicity and conflict is such a vast topic, and I want to explore it in a way that's useful for you and offer you some coaching tools that you can start using today. Quickly before we jump in, I'm compiling a Q&A session to end this mini coaching journey on your negative emotions. Here we can go through all your queries and comments about coaching your negative emotions, anything you want to share or comment on, and of course, anything that you want me to answer. So this is your chance to clarify things around buffering, your next level evolution, emotional intelligence, and whether, after listening to these sessions, you've decided that you're spending a lot of time in emotional childhood. Please send your questions to me on our website, Happiness-Matters.coach, and look for Ask Julia in the menu. Last week, we looked at the negative emotions that many of us experience at menopause, the midlife transition that all women go through somewhere between the ages of 45 and 60. And there were a lot of them, weren't there? I grouped them into 4 types of emotions to make more sense of them, but the top ones we know well are anger, frustration, irritation, hopelessness, embarrassment, shame, boredom, and desperation. Thanks for all your comments. It was a popular episode. And to say again, the menopause topic might not seem to be relevant to some of you listening, but it's actually a highly relevant topic for anyone in the world of work. With so many women in the workforce worldwide, it might be a colleague or your own manager, or even more importantly, you might be a manager of someone who is going through this life transition. So please listen in. It was a great episode to start the conversation of menopause at work and the opportunity for transformation that the midlife bardo offers us. Of course, if it is you in peri or post-menopause, please sign up to my blog, which is especially for you. You'll find the link under subscribe on Happiness-Matters.coach. Now this week, let's apply all we've learned so far about negative emotions to this edgy topic of negative emotions and the toxic behaviors they create, or conflict. We're going to look at them from 2 angles: what to do about them if others around you are using them, but more importantly, what to do if we use them ourselves. You and me, we're all guilty of toxicity. None of us are that perfect. Today's episode will shed light on what you might be doing yourself, but also primarily give you some tools to use when a colleague, employee, or even your boss are displaying some of these behaviors. What I'm finding pretty amusing is that as this podcast goes out, we're also celebrating Valentine's Day this week. So on the one hand, we're considering these highly destructive behaviors in the office, or to all relationships: contempt, stonewalling, defensiveness, and criticism. And then on the other hand, we're being corralled into thinking about love and romantic relationships. Both of them, we could say, somewhat inappropriate at work. Valentine's Day, Saint Valentine's Day, or the Feast of Saint Valentine. It's actually a Catholic feast day established by the Pope in 496 in honor of the Christian martyr Saint Valentine, who's famous for illegally marrying soldiers in Rome. It was only 1,000 years later when English playwright Geoffrey Chaucer first wrote about the association with romantic love in his poem The Parliament of Fools, written, no, not about Brexit and the EU drama, but to honour the treaty setting up the marriage between King Richard II of England to Anne of Bohemia. No marriages for romantic love in those days, only treaties. I might occasionally sing on the podcast, but reciting Chaucer poetry, not even the famous Canterbury Tales, you've got to be kidding. It took still another 400 years for Valentine's Day to become an occasion where couples expressed their love for each other. And even then, this was only in England. I first became aware of Valentine's Day when I went off to boarding school in South Africa when I was 14. My parents were living in Swaziland at the time. My first Valentine's Day breakfast was a time of hush and excitement. I had no real clue what was going on. The prefects handed out Valentine's Day cards to much giggling and teasing. And the following year was excruciating, as by then I knew the respect you got from receiving a card and the pity if you didn't. But my mother wasn't one of those who sent cards to spare their daughters the shame of not receiving anything. I'm sure she was unaware what a huge day it is in the lives of teenage girls. And it wasn't until the next year, my final year at school, when I got a few cards, including one that I had no idea who it was from, even though it was signed and reeked of some male deodorant. It took me ages to work it out. And nowadays, we're still Facebook friends. So funny. So Valentine's Day is now all over the world, and it's at work too, the celebration of love and affection. Days awash with hearts. The origin of that is a whole different story. With Cupid, the ancient Roman god of love, red roses, cards, soppy messages, doves, keys, and love locks. In honor of Valentine's Day at work, later this week, I've posted a few links in our show notes of things you can do at work. Let's say appropriate things. Nothing to do with Chaucer or the origin of the red heart. More along the lines of navigating the balance between work and romance, between the famous work-life divide. And you'll find the show notes for this podcast with these links on the website Happiness-Matters.coach. So from thinking about love and affection for each other to toxicity and conflict in relationships and at work. Now, toxic is such a strong word. It means poisonous, extremely harsh, malicious, and harmful. You probably all know Britney Spears' Bollywood-style 2004 song Toxic, about her lover as a dangerous, addictive drug. Actually, you probably remember it for the video where she's dressed only in diamonds. I've got a useful way of viewing toxic emotions and toxic behaviors at work and in relationships, one that I think will help you see them more clearly in yourself and others. I want to take out the drama that we are creating around the word toxic and conflict, as it's actually just adding to the difficulties. Then I want to give you some coaching tools from 3 perspectives, one from the team coaching that I do, and the others, which are rather unusual and which I introduce in next week's session, since we are focused primarily on coaching ourselves and crafting our own happiness and success. So let's start with this way of viewing toxic emotions and toxic behaviors. It's a clear way of viewing conflict and difficulties in relationships. And I want you to look at this from as open a perspective as you can. Yes, look for examples of these behaviors in the relationships around you, and also look at them in you. So as I go through each of them, I want you to call up some examples of these behaviors in work relationships, in your love and family relationships, And I want you to look for instances when you are using these toxic behaviors. And today we're looking at 4 toxic behaviors that are considered so lethal that they are referred to as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. They're criticism or blame, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. The reference, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, comes from the book of Revelation in the New Testament of the Christian Bible. They are the harbingers of the last judgment of humankind, riding into the world to set off a divine apocalypse upon us. These words are quite terrifying. Apocalypse means disastrous occurrence of the very worst kind, and harbinger means a bringer of change, usually bad. And the riders, the 4 horsemen, symbolize pestilence, war, famine, and death. And pestilence rides a white horse carrying a quiver filled with poison arrows containing the germs of all diseases. War rides a red horse carrying a sword signifying blood to be spilled. Famine rides a black horse carrying a scale symbolizing the way food will be distributed in a famine. And the last horseman, Death, rides a pale horse. It's Death himself carrying the scythe, followed by all of Hades, the resting place of the dead. How terrifying is this analogy? Terrifying. But this is what we're unleashing on our work and home relationships when we employ these toxic behaviors. The toxic behaviors of destructive conflict, criticism or blame, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. The reference to the 4 horsemen as toxic behaviors in relationships comes from Dr. John Gottman. Gottman and his wife Julia are relationship experts. They are both psychological researchers and clinicians from the States who are well known for their work on marital stability. Their Gottman Institute takes a research-based approach to relationships and has run the most extensive study ever done on marital stability, over 40 years of data with 3,000 couples. They're the authors of best-selling books such as The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, The Relationship Cure, and 8 Dates, Essential Conversations for a Lifetime of Love. And one of my favorite descriptions of John Gottman is by Newsweek. He's got the spirit of a scientist and the soul of a romantic. The insights from their research underlie much of the work being done nowadays in conflict resolution and relationship counseling. As you know, I'm also an organizational and relationship systems coach, and much of this research is foundational to its philosophy and practices. In my relationships coaching and Happiness Matters, I do use Gottman's work on the 4 horsemen, the positivity ratio, and the science of trust, just as I use the Buddhist philosophy of first, do no harm, and the insight work on afflictive emotions. But I also don't. There's a puzzle to work out if you stick around. Gottman's work points to these 4 behaviors as the most toxic to human relationships. He calls them the predictors of divorce. And so at work, where we don't even have the bonds of shared history and romantic memories of young love, you can see how dangerous these are to relationships between us, from our managers and colleagues, and within our teams. And the 4 horsemen analogy is a useful way to see these behaviors. We take them more seriously, especially when we discover them in ourselves. So let's explain them a little more so you know what to look out for. The first, criticism or blame. So criticism involves blaming or attacking your colleague or your partner. Now listen, we all have complaints about the other. No one ever is perfectly aligned all the time. But there's a huge difference between a complaint and a criticism. So do be careful not to judge a simple complaint about your behavior or someone else's as criticism and then create unnecessary relationship drama. This only escalates conflict and it's really not helpful. A complaint is usually about a specific failed action. And a criticism does the same, but it adds extra negativity about the other person, implying, so what's wrong with you? Defensiveness is the most likely response to criticism. I think we all know that. But it's actually just another way of blaming. So while the other is attacking us, we're saying, it's not me, it's you. And we feel justified and above the bad behavior. I see this a lot. But actually, we're contributing to the conflict just as much as the other person. The third one, contempt. So sarcasm, belittling, name-calling, hostile humor, belligerence, these are all examples of contempt, which is considered to be the most poisonous of all the horsemen, as it conveys our disgust and condescension. And contempt has actually been shown to be harmful to the physical health of the recipient. It's fueled by long, simmering negative thoughts about your colleagues or your partner that usually build up over time if they're not resolved. And the last one, stonewalling. Well, stonewalling involves the cold shoulder, and we all know that one well. The silent treatment, withdrawal, the refusal to engage, and the sulk, especially in teams. Now, it shows up often as reluctance to express directly what we're thinking. And it will show up in one partner when one of the other horsemen has been running wild. So it's basically a tuning out of criticism or contempt. So these 4 behaviors are considered death to most relationships, the predictors of divorce at home and work, if you will, and the precursor to remedial coaching in corporates, warning letters, getting fired, or even being first on the list for retrenchment because you're difficult to work with. I want to stop a minute and think about the impact of menopause and the midlife transition and its role in relationship conflicts. So much of my work with women involves these negative emotions that seem to explode out of us during menopause. Those seemingly uncontrollable feelings of unhappiness, anxiety, feeling powerless and out of control, depression, boredom, and frustration. And all of this is related to what's happening to us physically, emotionally, in our brains and our bodies. But it's our relationships, our lives at work, and the connections with our loved ones that seem to take the brunt of this time of change. My clients say that they find themselves yelling at the kids more, crying with frustration over something insignificant, flaring anger at a colleague's small mistake, and feeling completely stressed about things that they used to take in their stride, less tolerant of their husbands and bosses, and even of their teams. So usually this all ends up in yet more negative emotions, those of shame and embarrassment and self-judgment. And of course, heightened levels of conflict in their relationships and more toxic relationships. But all is not lost. I can assure you, whether these behaviors are running rife in your team or your boss constantly indulges in them, or you're noticing them in yourself or in your marriage, we can start working with them together here in today's session. If you're having real issues with difficult relationships or toxic colleagues, or even conflict at home, any relationship that's causing you emotional suffering and making you unhappy, please get on a call with me so we can discuss how we can work together. I have a short but effective 8-week one-on-one coaching program, especially for difficult relationships, and I've designed it for any relationship that is problematic for you. If you're interested, you can book a 20 minutes consult session with me to see how I can help you. Visit the website Happiness-Matters.coach and click on the yellow button called Coach with Julia. The coaching this week is to look around for the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse in all the relationships around you and to try out the first set of coaching tools, whether you're involved in the conflict from either side or whether you're watching from the sidelines. See how understanding the 4 horsemen can help you. How we work with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse is to look at how we can reduce the conflict in the situation immediately, actually neutralizing all the negativity in the relationship. They're poisonous, so we apply the antidotes. And each horseman has its own antidote, just like each poison has an antidote. The antidotes relate to how you respond when you're confronted by a horseman. Remember the difference between reaction and response. We spoke about it a few weeks ago on the episode about buffering, episode 1.23, and I will talk about it more next week, but as a very quick reminder, we are reacting to an external event, a trigger, when our behaviors are automatic, instinctive. And these automatic responses are linked to our survival, the fight, flight, and freeze reactions wired into our brains at an instinctual level, are animalistic survival instincts. They are also social patterns of reaction laid down early on in childhood. We are responding to the external event, the trigger, when we can override our automatic reaction, our instinct, with conscious thought, and we decide on purpose to respond effectively to what's facing us. What I'm sharing with you here are the responses, the conscious on-purpose actions you can practice in order to neutralize the poison of a horseman, for yourself and with others. Next week, we'll look at how you get yourself into response mode from the threatened reactive state of fight, flight, or freeze. So how you get yourself from reaction to response when you're imposing the 4 horsemen on others. Now, I know that you want to know right now how to do that. So the simplest tool I can give you, and the most effective probably, is my coaching tool, the 3 long, strong breaths. Download it from Happiness-Matters.coach out of the fun and free section and use it whenever you notice the emotional and somatic experiences of being triggered. Things like breathlessness, a churning stomach, constriction around your heart, the flash of anger, or a wash of fear. It will work for you, and then we can do some more coaching next week. The antidote for criticism or blame is to turn the criticism back into a complaint. Remember, complaints about another person are very normal. Not everyone in the world is the same as us. In fact, no one in the world feels, acts, and thinks the same as us. We have our own unique way. But we can work with complaints. They're not toxic at all. And to make complaints more useful to our relationships, try turning them into requests. So gently start up a complaint or a request. Avoid saying you and instead use statements like I feel. And when listening to criticism, look out for the reasonable request in the complaint. And remember that every single criticism out there is actually just a very unskillful request. And I'm thinking now, to bring life to these antidotes, why not send me your examples and we can explore these in the next Q&A session coming up. Remember, you can submit them to me on the website under the Ask Julia section on the menu. Then, with defensiveness, don't react against criticism with a counterattack, trying to shift the blame. Then the conflict just cycles and escalates. Rather, the antidote is to repeat what you've heard and ask for more clarity. And key here, something for all of us, is to look for the 2% truth in what you're hearing. There's always some truth in a criticism. Remember the saying, the truth always hurts? Well, it does to an extent, 2% at least. And if what you're saying to someone else results in them reacting with defensiveness, then rephrase what you're saying so the other person hears it differently and it lands better with them. The antidote for contempt is to express your feelings, identify the unwanted behavior, and be genuinely willing to resolve the situation. If you're feeling contemptuous towards someone, right now, Stop any sarcasm, name-calling, and harmful teasing. And then look for the best in them. Look for what you can respect them for. Possibly their knowledge or their value to the team. Look for something that will soften your stance. And then use sentences like, I feel and what I want is, where the emphasis is on what you need, not what you need them to do or to change. So it's about focusing less on moral superiority and more on building up appreciation and respect in the relationship. The antidote for stonewalling is when you or the other person in the interaction are flooded. It's all become too much, and it's about shutting down, feeling unsafe, and trying to remove oneself from the dangerous situation. So what's needed first here, before you or the other will rejoin the engagement, is to cool down, to feel safe again, and allow for this time. Then you can approach it again. And there you have it, applying the antidotes to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the behaviours that break relationships and escalate conflict. I've put some links in the show notes for you to expand your insights on the antidotes and how to use them. And remember to send me your examples so we can bring life to this coaching in the upcoming Q&As. So my Valentine's gift to all of you this week is to use my coaching tool, the 3 long, strong breaths, to help you operate from response mode rather than your automatic or default mode, the mode of your primal brain, as well as the antidotes to help you neutralize the toxic behaviors in yourself and others, spreading a little loving kindness to all your relationships today. Then next week, we'll look at why the antidotes work by looking at what's really going on here. We'll look at the afflictive emotions behind the 4 horsemen, and even then what's behind the afflictive emotions. And we'll use it all to coach ourselves to our own happiness and the happiness and success of all our relationships. My wish for you today: may you be happy, may you be free. There is no better time to do this together. Bye for now from Fraser and I. Enjoy a toxin-free Valentine's Day in all your relationships, and please remember to spread the love by sharing and promoting this podcast today.
Thanks for joining us on this Happiness Matters podcast. Do join us again here next week on Tuesday. You can subscribe to this series at Apple Podcasts on iTunes, or you can sign up for it on our website, Happiness-Matters.coach. That's Happiness-Matters.coach. COACH. Also, you can join our conversation on Facebook by following us there. Our Facebook page is also Happiness-Matters.coach.